What up, gamers? Welcome to my Albion Online Journal Guide. In this video, I'd like to explain what the Albion Journal is, why, and how you should use it. First, I'll tell you about myself. I'm an Albion Twitch streamer who's been playing the game for way too long. When the Path to Glory update hit in July of 2024, I set out to try to complete as many journal entries as possible. When they added journal completion to the rankings leaderboard, I was in first place on the West server, and I've continued to maintain the first place ranking until now. You might be wondering why you should engage with the Albion Journal. Well, there's a few different reasons. First, you might want to try to unlock any of the avatars, avatar rings, wardrobe skins, or mount skins that you get for hitting certain thresholds in each of the categories in the journal. You might also want to try to unlock the rewards for each individual journal entry, as some of them are pretty substantial. Finally, you might just want to try new things in the game. As Albion is such a huge game, it's extremely easy to get stuck in a rut of doing the same types of content over and over. By using the journal, you can try new things and maybe find new types of content you enjoy or find rewarding. At the end of the day, I really believe this is the best purpose of the journal, to show new and old players more parts of the game. I'm going to go through each of the categories and talk about how you can unlock each of the rewards, as well as giving some tips for specific categories and even journal entries along the way. Some journal entries are very easy, whereas some are varying degrees of difficult. When I say difficult, it could mean a journal entry requires a lot of time invested to grind out the requirement. It could mean that a journal entry has an expensive silver cost required to invest. It could mean that a journal entry actually requires a lot of skill in order to complete it. Or in the case of a few journal entries, you actually just need really lucky RNG. Now let's look through each of the categories individually. We'll start with PvE as it's the first one. For PvE, if you complete 20% of the journal category, you can unlock this PvE avatar. If you complete 40% of the category, you get this talisman looking avatar ring. If you complete 60% of the category, you get the Cube of Fate, which is actually a functioning dice that you can roll. If you complete 80% of the category, you unlock the Delver's Dire Bear skin that you can use on any bear. And finally, if you manage to unlock 100% of the category, you unlock the Icosahedron of Fate, which is actually a functioning D20. I haven't actually seen anyone use this yet. I don't know if anyone has it yet, but it sure seems cool. I would say most of the category of PvE is actually fairly easy to do. None of the categories are exceptionally difficult in terms of a task to do. Expeditions, for the most part, are fairly easy. Once you get to the hardcore expeditions, it gets a little bit more tricky because you either need to put together a group or find a hardcore expedition group that's willing to take you in. I've done all but the last three. The last three are a little bit more difficult, so I've actually just left those ones for now. The solo random dungeon ones are all very easy. Ones that people might find a little bit tricky are the ones down here, which are defeat a T6 boss, T7 boss, and T8 boss with T3 equipment. There's a little bit of a trick to that one. It's a nature staff. Taking a nature staff in makes it fairly easy. I actually tried this initially with a couple different weapons. I tried it with a one-hand dagger, and I was able to do T6, but once I got to T7, it got pretty hard. But if you take a T3 nature staff in, you can do these without much effort at all. The last ones that I haven't completed in solo random dungeons are finish 300 solo dungeons and finish 600 solo dungeons. Those really just take a whole lot of time. You might be wondering why I have 1,000 solo dungeons completed here, but I don't have 300 solo dungeons. That's because finish 1,000 solo dungeons is actually an achievement in the actual achievements in the game. If you go to your stats and you go to achievements here, there's legacy achievements here that were out before the journal came out. And these ones, if you had completed it, carried over to the journal. So that means if you happen to have completed one of these achievements and then they just transferred over that achievement into the journal, it counted as completed. But any of the ones leading up to it didn't complete. So for example, you might have completed 1,000 solo dungeons, but they don't believe that you actually completed 300 of them. The roaming mobs category is fairly easy. It might take a little bit of time. I would say a lot of this can be done passively. So if you're out roaming the world and you're doing other kinds of content in the black zone, in the red zone, or whatever, and you happen to see a mob mini boss or a mob boss or whatever, finish it along the way. I don't think you necessarily have to go out and spend too much time grinding out the roaming mobs. If you want to, you can. They're also a good source of silver and fame, so it's not a waste of time by any means. But for the most part, I would say these are just something that you can do while doing other content. The static dungeon subcategory is fairly straightforward. Everything listed here makes perfect sense. You don't really need too much explanation. In terms of getting the 100 million fame here, for example, I personally just did it in a yellow zone static. You could certainly do it in a black zone static and go a little bit quicker. But because I could do it solo in a yellow zone static, that's how I did it. For the other ones, doing them out in the black zone might be a little bit easier for sure. Things like mini bosses and bosses tend to be pretty hard to find in the yellow and blue zone statics. So finding them out in the black zone ones is a little bit easier. So dynamic encampments is actually a subcategory that they added to the PvE journal on the last patch, the last big content update that they put out. It wasn't originally in here, so I haven't actually completed as much of it. I've only got 68% of this one. Most of it is fairly easy, but a lot of it is a pretty big grind. Finding lots and lots of layers isn't something that's necessarily easy to do, because first you have to find the map for the layer, and then you have to find the layer, and then you have to complete it. In my experience, you can often find about one layer per zone, which means if you're trying to find hundreds of layers, it's going to take some time. The group random dungeons category is fairly straightforward. The ones that I haven't completed are just lots and lots of group dungeons. You have to open a lot of group dungeon chests, and you have to do a lot of group dungeons. I personally don't find a lot of reward in doing group dungeons, so it hasn't been a category that I've necessarily focused on, but I did enough to get 14 out of 19. The tracking subcategory is pretty straightforward as well. They have you hunting down certain mobs, they have you doing a certain number of hunts, all that sort of stuff. You do have to do solo and group tracking. The ones that are the time-consuming ones, which would be the ones that are just a whole bunch of different hunts, you can do those solo, makes it a little bit easier. Any journal entry that you can do solo, I find a little bit easier because you don't have to put a group together to find it. The world bosses is the one that I have the least accomplished in the PvE journal. World bosses are difficult. First of all, you have to find a world boss team. You can try to organize one if you want, but it's difficult. A lot of guilds do tend to run world boss zones as well. So if you happen to be in a guild that runs world bosses, then it's certainly something that's more accessible. For a lot of people, it's a lot less accessible. I've done some, and I even found a world boss team recently that seemed pretty cool, so I plan on doing more of them. But that one's a little bit more work. Finally, in the PvE category, we have Avalonian dungeons. Avalonian dungeons are pretty straightforward. You have to do a lot of them, though. You have to do all different kinds in order to unlock various achievements, but on top of that, you have to do hundreds of Avalonian dungeons. You also have to get lucky and find a legendary chest. I haven't gotten lucky on that. Ava dungeons also take quite a while. So when you sit here and imagine, oh, I have to do 40 Avalonian dungeons for this one, imagine that an Avalonian dungeon is going to take at least an hour, sometimes 2 hours. Some people, if they're not great at it, could even be 3 or 4 hours. So when you look at this category, it's definitely a more difficult one. You also have to find a team that's actually doing Ava dungeons. Not everyone has access to Ava teams, so joining a Discord or seeing if your guild runs them is definitely a way to do it. Now, in order to unlock the various unlocks in the category, I decided to take some time and create infographics. Shield your eyes for a second here. It is a lot. I didn't realize these would be so full of information until I started actually putting it together. The purpose of these infographics is to show you which entries in the category I think are fairly easy to do if you're trying to unlock the avatar ring, the wardrobe skin, or the mount skin. For example, to get the avatar skin in PvE, you need to get 90 achievements done. And so I've listed with stars here which ones I think would be the easiest 90. And then if you want to get the wardrobe skin, I've listed off what I think are the easiest 135. So that would be any of the ones with the star and the ones with the moon included. Finally, if you want to get the mount skin, you'd have to do all of those and then the ones with the heart. I've also marked a few on here as ones that I don't necessarily think are worth trying to grind for. So if you're simply trying to get as many achievements as you can in the category, I would probably ignore the ones with the black X's. So that would be things like finish 500 group dungeons, unlock 300 chests in Avalonian dungeons, or unlock 1,000 open world small camp caches, or finish 1,000 solo dungeons, or finish every hardcore expedition on level 18. The reason I would ignore these is these are all going to take a lot of time. So if you're just looking to get category completion done, if you're trying to unlock various things in the category, I would ignore these ones and instead focus on the other ones. When I started making this, I realized this is way too much information for you to digest in the YouTube video. So instead, I'm going to link these in the description. I'll have them labeled and linked in the description so you can open them up on your own. Again, it's worth stating that the ones that are listed on here as easiest to do, hardest to do, etc., those are all based on my opinion. I don't have any arbitrary way of qualifying each of these as hard or difficult or time consuming or anything. So these are just based on my opinion, my feeling, but hopefully it helps you. Next, we move on to the economy category. I would say this category is unequivocally the easiest one to get to 100%. The only barrier to get to 100% in this category is a lot of silver. I would say everything is designed in this category to actually make you silver, but in order to do each of those different tasks in a way that'll make you silver, it's very time consuming. So you can spend years and years slowly grinding out this category, making silver along the way, or you can do what I did and just throw as much silver as you have to at it. I spent so much silver completing this category, it is ridiculous. I didn't keep track at all, but I know it's probably in the billions, just wasted completing this category. In the economy category, if you get to 20%, you get this nice little avatar. If you get to 40%, you get this avatar ring. It's a nice little gold necklace type thing. If you get to 60%, you get the decadent robe. And this is a skin that allows you to throw piles of 5k silver. If you get to 80%, you get this transport mammoth skin. It is the only transport mammoth skin in the game at this time, so it's pretty valuable. And of course, if you get to 100%, you get the exorbitant robe. And this one allows you to throw 15k silver. It is pretty cool looking as well. The first subcategory is buying items. Obviously, you have to buy a whole bunch of items. You have to spend a whole bunch of silver on the marketplace. Some of these are super easy to do. For example, if you want to spend 1 billion silver on items at the marketplace, you can just go to the marketplace and just buy and buy items until you spent 1 billion silver. All you need to do is have 1 billion silver in order to do that. Some of them are more time consuming. Something like buy 10 million items at the marketplace takes a long time. For someone that's playing the game a lot and is heavily invested in econ, this will happen eventually. But for someone that's not, the easiest way to do would be to buy tiny, tiny things. You go to each market, you find things that are the least amount of silver, and then you put in tons and tons and tons of buy orders until you've reached 10 million items. For example, I was buying runes, I was buying souls, I was buying relics, I was buying rough logs, I was buying rough stones, I was buying T3 items, I was buying all kinds of stuff so I could try to hit that 10 million items at the marketplace as quick as possible. Likewise, selling items, you just got to sell a whole bunch of stuff. Some of these are a little bit easier. Things like sell any item on the black market, you can do in about 2 seconds. Something like create a sell order on the black market takes about 2 seconds. Something like earn 1 billion silver through the black market is a little bit more time consuming. If you're an actual econ player and you're transporting things to Carleon to sell on the black market, earning 1 billion silver through the black market probably isn't that big of a task. It'll certainly take a while, it might take months, it might take years, but if you're transporting and selling items on the black market, eventually you'll hit 1 billion silver. I didn't have that kind of time, so what I did instead is I went to the Carleon market, I filled up a mammoth, I took it over to the black market, I sold it. I went back to the Carleon market, filled up my mammoth, took it back to the black market. I did that quite a few times. I don't know how much silver I lost in the process. I wasn't keeping track of it, but I know I was losing silver on pretty much every sale. There's also an entry here for selling 10,000 of the preferred luxury goods to each market. I'll tell you the easiest way to do those. What you want to do is put in a buy order that's more than the cost of that item there. So for example, if the item sells for 5,000 that market, you put in a buy order for 5,002, and then every single person that's trying to sell it there will automatically sell it to you. And then once you have all of those, you just, again, resell them at a loss. You'll lose a little bit of silver, but it's really more just a time sink on those ones. Next is refining. You have to refine resources of every tier. You have to transmute. You have to refine a lot of resources. The top one here is 100,000 resources. If you're, again, someone that refines on the regular, if you're actively refining your own resources, hitting 100,000 was probably something that's just going to happen naturally. If you're not and you're trying to speedrun it, all you're going to want to do is buy very low tier resources and just refine them constantly. Then you'll hit 100,000. Next, we have the crafting subcategory. It's, again, pretty straightforward. You have to craft a lot of items. I was stuck on 24 out of 25 on these for a while. And the reason for that is you have to craft a pristine T8 masterpiece item. If you don't know what that means, pristine T8 masterpiece means 8-4 masterpiece. There's a couple different ways to do this. The way that actually worked for me was just spam crafting 8-4 items until I got a masterpiece. It took a little bit of time, cost a little bit of silver. There is a little bit of an easier way, and the easier way to do that, I'll show you. There is a little bit of an easier way, and the way to do this guaranteed is by crafting a faction cape. If you didn't know already, when you take a cape and turn it into a faction cape, it keeps the quality. So if you have an 8-4 masterpiece cape and turn it into any faction cape, it'll automatically count as a 8-4 pristine. The problem with this is that you have to find an 8-4 masterpiece cape. They're either very expensive or literally just not available because of either people doing this or just people that want 8-4 masterpiece capes. Item conversions. These are mostly going to be salvage, reroll, study. They're all pretty straightforward. They do take some time. For things like reroll 100,000, I'll tell you what I did was I just bought T3, T4 items, thousands of them, moved them over, re-rolled them. Once they hit excellent, I took them, I sold them back on the market. In doing so, you're also completing some of the buying and selling subcategory as well. So you can kind of multitask some of these. Obviously, re-rolling 100,000 items is also probably something that's going to happen just from playing the game, especially if you're an econ player eventually. But if you want to do it quicker, just buy a whole bunch of items and re-roll them. Accumulate wealth. This is probably the laziest category. All you need to do is get to 1 billion silver. Some of you guys probably already have 1 billion silver. If not, maybe you have a friend that has 1 billion silver. In theory, all you would have to do is get someone to trade you 1 billion silver, have it for a second so you complete the category, and then you can trade it back. Whether or not you have a friend to loan you 1 billion silver or not, it's hard to say. I generally do have around 1 billion silver accessible, but initially, before they actually released the journal, there was an entry here for 10 billion silver, and I almost never have 10 billion silver. So I had prepared to ask a couple of friends to lend me some silver just for a second so I could complete the category, but luckily they took out the 10 billion silver. Last but certainly not least, and this is definitely the thing that'll be the peak, the hardest one to do in the economy journal, probably the one that you're struggling with, or probably the one that most people have struggled with if they're trying to get to 100%, and that's city plots. If you haven't spent time engaging in city plots previously, buying a plot in a city and using it to make silver, you're going to notice that this is a big pain to do. Plots are obviously pretty expensive. Then you have to upgrade the buildings. Then you have to feed the plot. It gets to be a lot of work. Some of the entries on here are fairly straightforward. You can do pretty easily. Things like bidding 1 million silver on a city plot, you can do just by, again, bidding 1 million silver. If you don't win the city plot, you don't have to pay it. So you literally just have to bid it. Owning a city plot, you just have to bid enough to own a city plot. Where this entry gets a little bit harder is you have to collect a certain amount of silver from city plots, all the way up to collect 1 billion silver from city plots. I'll give you a little hint here. Each city plot on the West server, for example, on average in about a week earns 1 to 5 million silver. Sometimes more, sometimes less. If there happens to be a crafting bonus or something going on, it could even go up to 20, 30 million. But if you have to extrapolate that information, if you're making, say, 5 million silver on a city plot, how long do you have to have a city plot, or how many weeks do you have to have a city plot in order to hit 1 billion? The obvious answer to this is just have more city plots. So if you just keep buying more and more city plots, eventually you're going to keep earning more and more silver from them. One thing that I did personally, again, I was trying to complete the category. I wasn't trying to make silver throughout the process, was I would buy a city plot and then I would log into one of my alts and I would craft myself on my own city plot, just spam craft myself on my own city plot so the silver would go to the city plot so that I could collect it and then increase the amount that I've earned from that city plot. This is a way that I was able to speed up the process, but it still takes a lot of work to hit 1 billion silver from city plots. The other thing to keep in mind is that you just have to collect 1 billion silver from city plots. It doesn't necessarily have to be a city plot that you own. So if you were to say, find someone that's willing to help you out that owns a whole bunch of city plots, you might be able to finish this one quicker. Now let's take a look at my handy dandy economy infographic. So the ones that are fairly easy, again, are all marked with the stars. You need to get 55 to get the avatar ring, and they're all marked there. In order to get the wardrobe skin, you need to have 82. So you would want to do the ones with stars as well as one with the moons. And then if you want to get the mount skin, you would want to do the ones with stars, moons, and hearts. I would say the ones with city plots are the ones that you want to ignore. Once you get to the point of going for the mount skin, you'll probably have to do some of the city plot category. But for the most part, trying to grind out 1 billion silver from city plots is only worth it if you're trying to go for 100%. Otherwise, I would just follow the guide that you have here. Obviously, some of these are going to be easier for some people and harder for others. For example, if you have 1 billion silver, then this one's automatically done in the accumulate wealth. So that one wouldn't really apply to you. The next category is gathering. In gathering, if you complete 20%, you get the gatherer's avatar. If you complete 40%, you get the Gatherer's Avatar Ring. If you complete 60%, you get the Sharpened Axe, which is a skin that allows you to erect a tree. If you get to 80%, you get the Mechanical Boar skin. And finally, if you somehow get to 100%, you get the Razor Sharp Axe. I haven't actually seen this one used, but I gotta imagine it makes a real big tree. A lot of different subcategories here to go through. First, we'll start with resources. For the most part, gathering all the different kinds of resources are pretty straightforward and easy. One prerequisite is you do have to be in a guild because you do have to gather on enemy guilds in order to do it. The big ones here are mostly just gathering a whole bunch of resources. You got to gather up to 10 million fame worth of gathering resources, so it's a pretty big commitment. Otherwise, it's all pretty straightforward. The next category is hide animals. Hide animals is actually one of the more difficult categories. The thing that actually makes it really difficult is a lot of RNG is involved. For example, you have to skin a whole bunch of different types of hide animals. Many of the different types of hide animals you can find just by going into certain zones and knowing they're there. But some different types of hide animals you can't find specifically. For example, the plentiful hide nodes that you would find in the myths do count for this category. So there's one for skin 65 types, and the next one is skin all types of hide animal. In order to do that, you would have to go through the myths. You would have to get an epic or legendary one, so you can get a T7 or T8 miss, and then you have to get lucky and happen to have a plentiful hide node in those that you can gather. It's a lot of work and it's a lot of RNG. I've been actively trying to complete more of this, and I'm still stuck at 59 out of 65, so it's definitely one of the more difficult ones. The other hard thing in this category is that you have to loot different baby animals. For example, you have to loot basic ones that you can find often, so things like fawns, swift cubs, etc. But you also have to loot hard ones like mammy cubs. I don't know how many players out there in the game have looted a mammy cub before. I've personally looted 3, I believe, twice while doing a world boss and one on just a T8 mammoth, but it's not necessarily something you can force. So trying to grind out looting a mammy baby is a pretty hard thing to do. You could sit in T8 hide zones every day for the next year and still not get a mammoth cub, or you could get lucky and get it on the first day, but it's not necessarily something you can grind out. The fishing subcategory is actually the one that I effectively completed most recently. A couple days ago, I set out to try to fish more types of fish, and I've now managed to fish every different type of fish. It was a little bit tricky. You have to get a little bit lucky. You have to go through various zones. Certain ones are in certain zones. I also had quite a bit of help with my chat. I showed the ones that I needed, and they were able to give me a guide on where I'd find them. So if you guys happen to have a Twitch chat that's helpful, that'll definitely help. If not, you'll have to do the work yourself. They are all listed so you can find which fish you need. And if you click on the fish, it'll tell you where you can find the fish as well. So for example, if you're looking for a murkwater clam, you can look in the swamps, forests, and steppes. The zone has to be at least that tier for you to get it. So for example, if you need a rare T5, the zone has to be at least T5. If you need a rare T7, the zone has to be at least T7. Sharks, you want to go to starter zones. It's definitely the easiest way to do it. Some people have said it takes hours to find a shark. Some have spent days. I happen to get lucky and find a shark within about 3 minutes, but your luck might vary. The bottom of this category happens to be catch fish worth 3 million fame and catch fish worth 10 million fame. You're not going to get to 10 million fame fishing unless you're actually a dedicated fisher, and even then, that's a huge commitment. This part here, which is catch fish worth 1 million fame, was actually an achievement in the old achievements, so it carried over. When I did that on the old achievements, you were able to just eat fish and use that fishing fame to count towards it. But now they've actually patched it where you actually have to catch the fish in order to get these last two, so that's a lot of time. I'd be willing to spend a day sitting there eating 10 million fame worth of fish. It might be expensive, but I wouldn't mind doing it for the journal. But I don't think I could take enough time to go fish for 10 million fame. The next category here is resource creatures. So these ones are any sort of mob that you have to kill in order to harvest the resources. Some of them are fairly easy. The only thing that gets difficult is that a lot of these you will need a group. They've now made a lot of the larger mobs harder to solo. Some of them are almost impossible to solo. So in order to do that, you have to have a group in order to hunt down, say, ancient resources, aspects, etc. If you do have a group that'll go out gathering with you, it'll obviously become a little bit easier, but it's still pretty RNG dependent. So I'm still missing 5 in this category, literally just because I haven't found enough aspects. The final subcategory is biomes. Biomes basically just has you going and gathering in different types of zones. These ones are all pretty straightforward. I've done a lot of them here. The ones that are actually kind of difficult are the ones that are gathered 10,000 resources in various zones. When the journal first came out, there was a little bit of a workaround. Any sort of island or yellow or blue zone counted as that biome. So if you wanted to go gather 10,000 resources in a mountain region, you could just go to an island that was in a mountain region and gather rough logs. Because rough logs come 50 a piece, you could just sit there gathering rough logs and do it in about an hour. I did this for a couple. I'm not going to lie. For a couple of them, I think the swamp and probably highland, I went out and I gathered rough logs, get to 10K. And then I got bored and stopped doing it. And about a week after I got bored, they put out a patch that made rough logs not work for this. So now you actually have to gather resources. It is quite a bit of resources. Obviously, you have to gather 50,000 resources in the black zone. That's something that'll just happen naturally if you're someone that's regularly gathering the black zone. Otherwise, I wouldn't necessarily go ahead and try to grind it. It's a lot of work to go ahead and grind 50K resources in the black zone. So I would say if you're not someone that's actively gathering, don't try to actually do that. Let's take a look at my gathering infographic that I made here. Again, this is the path of least resistance. So if you're trying to find which journal entries you should go for in order to get the avatar ring, the wardrobe skin, or the mount skin, these are the ones that I think would be the easiest. Your results may vary. It all depends on what you do, of course, but these are the ones that I find the easiest. So the ones that are the easiest, the 48 in order to get the avatar ring, are the ones marked with a star. In order to get the wardrobe skin, you need 71. So that would be the star plus the moons. To get the mount skin, you only need 95, which isn't a ton compared to the other categories. And so that would be the stars plus the moons plus the hearts. This one also has quite a few X's. The ones that I would say you shouldn't try to grind for are loot all wild baby animals. Because again, you need a mammoth cub. You can't force a mammoth cub. You just got to get lucky. Catch fish worth 10 million fame. I tried to calculate how long it would take. If you're actively fishing, you're probably going to spend a good 30 days of fishing for hours, something like that, in order to get 10 million fame. If you're actually dedicated just going out and fishing constantly. Harvest 30,000 resources from ancient resource mobs. Again, that's RNG. If you're going out gathering in a group and you're finding ancient resource mobs often, it's not that bad, but otherwise I wouldn't necessarily set out on it. And again, gather 50K resources in Black Zone, because unless you're someone that's actively gathering the Black Zone regularly, you don't want to set out doing this just for this category. Now, the exploration category. If you get to 20%, you get this Explorer's Avatar. If you get to 40%, you get this Avatar Ring. If you get to 60%, you get the Wanderer's Lute, which actually allows you to sit and play a song that other people can hear. If you get to 80%, you get the Voyager's Cat. It's a pretty cute skin. It actually lays down when you're not on it, so it's pretty cool. And then if you manage to get to 100% in exploration, you get the Troubadour's Lute, which I imagine plays a different song. For subcategories, we've got cities. In order to do this, you mostly just have to go to all the different cities, of course. You have to use a save portal, and you have to go to the rest out in the outlands. The next subcategory is travel. In order to do this, you have to move around a whole bunch. You have to get on all different kinds of mounts. Pretty straightforward. And you have to find hidden treasures. The hidden treasures and the coffer chests in the open world are probably the thing that are going to be most time consuming in this one. I haven't completed all of them. But you also have to travel 10,000 kilometers, and that'll take a while. The next subcategory is zone types. This one, again, is all straightforward. You have to get fame at various zones. The hardest one, I guess, would be get 1,000,000 fame in a quality level 6 black zone, but it's also something that'll just happen now. The next subcategory is reputation. They do have you getting all different types of reputation. If you're not aware of how reputation works, reputation is this system here, which essentially, if you attack people in red zones, your reputation goes down. Or if you kill mobs in red zones, your reputation goes up. So what you need to do is you have to go out and gank or kill people in the red zone, so your reputation goes down. And once it gets down to nefarious, then you can start bringing it back up again. And you can get to the maximum level and you get to virtuous, and then you've completed it. The next subcategory is myths. Myths has a lot of different tasks that you have to do. They also include Nightfall Abbey in the exploration part of myths here. I would say the parts in the Nightfall Abbey are actually the hardest. You have to unlock a whole bunch of chests. For example, I haven't gone anywhere close to unlocking 500 chests in Nightfall Abbey. You're not guaranteed to get a chest when you kill the mobs in Nightfall Abbey. It could just be a buff. So it could take a lot of time going Nightfall Abbey in order to unlock that. You also have to get to various standings in Brazilian. Getting, for example, to the venerated one takes quite a bit of time. I would say the easiest way to do that is literally just free all the wisps that you see in the mist, but it is going to take a bit of time. This isn't a super hard category, but if you're someone that doesn't actively play the mist, it's probably one that's going to be pretty draining. The next subcategory is might and favor. You don't have to do anything special for this other than get might and favor, of course. Might and favor are things that come from doing content that you'll probably naturally do anyways. I haven't completed the last one, which is earn 5 million might. I would say on average, I get something like 2 million might per season. So it's probably something that's going to take me about 2.5 seasons. I'm at about 1 million might away now. The last subcategory here is Roads of Avalon. A lot of the Roads of Avalon subcategory is pretty time consuming. You have to open a whole bunch of chests. You've got to kill a whole bunch of mobs. I haven't even got to killing 5,000 mobs in the roads, and I play the roads quite a bit. You have to open all the different kinds of chests as well. So that means you have to do the green ones, either with a small group, blue with a medium-sized group, or the yellow ones with a large group. It is a pretty time-consuming subcategory, I would say. If you're someone that does the roads actively, especially if you do various kinds of content in the roads, it'll probably happen. Otherwise, it's definitely a grind. Checking out my exploration infographic here, there is 139 total. You need to get 56 of the achievements in order to get the avatar ring. I've marked those with the gold star. In order to get the wardrobe skin, you need to get to 84. So those are the gold star plus the moon. In order to get the mount skin, you need 112. So that is the gold star, the moon, and the hearts. I don't think any of these are necessarily really, really hard to do. There isn't any one that I would say completely avoid doing. Getting venerated Brazilian standing, again, is pretty hard to do if you're not someone that actually plays the mist regularly. Earning 100 million fame in the Roads of Avalon will actually just happen from doing the roads enough. Otherwise, I'd say it's all pretty straightforward, all stuff that can be done. Next category is PvP. This is definitely the hardest category for most players out there. I happen to be someone who spends most of my time in Albion PvPing. My main goal is pretty much always PvP, so a lot of this stuff does come pretty naturally to me, but for the most part, this might be a pretty hard category. Once you get 20%, you get this cool PvP avatar. Once you get to 40%, you get this avatar ring. Once you get to 60%, you'll get this cool wardrobe skin, the Sinister Helmet. This also allows you to put a little Grim Reaper looking guy above your head. Cool little effect. Once you get to 80%, you unlock the Lurking Shadows skin for any wolf. I personally haven't seen many people that have the Lurking Shadow skin. So if you do unlock it, I think it's pretty pristine. I use it myself just because I know how rare it is. If you manage to get to 100%, you get this Malevolent Helmet, which I imagine makes a bigger Grim Reaper. I will say you probably won't get to 100%. I think it's probably unlikely that anyone will get to 100% anytime soon. But if you do, this is what you would get. Let's go through the different subcategories here. We've got arenas. The arena ones are all pretty easy. You have to do a lot of arenas though. If you're someone that doesn't like doing arenas or crystal arenas, you'll probably find this pretty boring, but you can definitely knock out a few pretty quickly. Next, you have crystal arenas. The crystal arena subcategory is literally just rankings and points. So in order to do that, you have to get to crystal ranking, and then you have to win a match by at least 150 point margin. I would say if you're someone that's able to get to crystal rank and crystal arena, you're going to get a match that has at least 150 point margin at some point in time anyways. 150-0 happens pretty regularly if you're getting to the point of getting to a crystal rank, but it is something that's a little bit more difficult. The ranks in the crystal arena in Albion aren't necessarily skill tests. They're mostly just time involved. So if you're someone that's able to play with a small group, say 2 friends, or if you can put together a decent team of 5, you'll get there pretty quickly. If you're playing solo, it'll probably take a little bit longer, but they do have pretty cool rewards if you do. The next subcategory here is Corrupted Dungeons. The Corrupted Dungeons subcategory has you doing a lot of different kinds of Corrupted Dungeons. You have to do Hunter, Stalker, Slayer. In order to do these, you have to do a lot of them as well. At the end, you have to defeat 666 players in full loot Corrupted Dungeons. If you're not someone that actively does Corrupted Dungeons, this will take a long time. I've actually spent a lot of time doing Corrupted Dungeons in my time in Albion, but not necessarily in the last couple seasons. I've actually tried to grind out this category, and I've set myself on doing, an hour, 2 hours of Corrupted Dungeons here, and I've only got to 59 out of 666 kills. So this is more so for someone that's actively doing Corrupted Dungeons on a long-term scale. I did the math a little bit on this one here. I would say if you're really lucky, you can get something like 3 to 4 kills an hour in Corrupted Dungeons. So what that probably means is that you've got something like 200 plus hours of corrupted dungeons in order to get to 666 players killed in full loot corrupted dungeons. 200 plus hours would be a long time. So if you're someone that doesn't actively do corrupted dungeons, I don't necessarily think this is one that you want to try to grind for. Next subcategory is faction warfare. When I talked earlier about trying different content in the game, faction warfare has actually been the one that surprised me the most. I pretty much never did any yellow zone faction warfare before this. I'm pretty anti-yellow zone, especially anti-yellow zone PvP. So it wasn't something that I jumped into. But going out and trying to capture the different points and trying to get kills in yellow zone faction, increase my faction rating was actually pretty fun. I enjoyed it quite a bit. The ones that I haven't fully completed yet are the red zone faction kills. A lot of the times when I go out for a red zone bandit event or just red zone faction in general, there isn't a lot of people actively fighting. So getting those ones done is pretty hard if you're someone that doesn't do red zone faction often, but it can be done for sure. I would say this is the category that surprised me the most though. The next subcategory is open world PvP. This category has a variety of different things. You have to get kill fame, you have to kill people in full loot zones, you have to kill people in various areas. This one had me going out and killing people in statics. This one had me killing people in black zone, in the roads, all kinds of stuff. If you're someone that does a variety of different content, this category will complete itself eventually, but it does have a huge requirement for some of them. For example, getting 500 million kill fame in black zones is probably going to take quite a while for some people. For a lot of players out there, they might not even have 5 million kill fame, so trying to get 5 million kill fame in the black zone specifically might take some time. The next subcategory here is Hellgates. Hellgates happen to be my favorite content in Albion by far. This is the thing that I've spent the most time doing in Albion. So this category is a breeze for me, but for most players, it's going to be pretty hard. When I talked earlier about the skill check in some of these achievements, this is definitely one that has a pretty big skill check. When you get all the way down to the bottom, you need to get 250k infamy in 10v10 Hellgates, 250k infamy in 5v5 Hellgates, and 250k infamy in 2v2 Hellgates. I went through the infamy rankings. In terms of players that have actually gotten 250k in all three categories, it's a small handful. Not a whole lot of players have actually managed to go and get 250k infamy in all three categories. And the reason for that is Hellgates are hard. You have to beat other players in order to increase your infamy. And the amount of players that are interested in doing all different types of Hellgates is also pretty small. So in order to try to complete this category, it's pretty difficult. It's definitely a barrier of entry for most players in terms of completing. And when I talked earlier about how I don't necessarily think anyone will get to 100%, this is probably the biggest one out there. The amount of players out there that are able to get to 250k infamy in 10v10 Hellgates and 5v5, etc., and are still interested in doing things like faction warfare or corrupted dungeons is incredibly small. When you consider that in order to do this, you have to be someone that spends a lot of their time playing Hellgates, you don't necessarily have the time to go ahead and do Yellow Zone faction warfare. The last subcategory here is the Crystal League. And if I were to make a wild guess, I would say if you looked at most journals out there, this probably has a very high rate of being 0%, meaning a lot of players out there have literally 0% completed in this subcategory. Crystal League is a content in Albion that isn't necessarily the most active these days. SBI has removed a lot of support from Crystal League by nerfing rewards, removing the CLC, etc., etc. So not a lot of players compete in the Crystal League. On top of that, all of the achievements here are based on completing matches and winning matches in the Crystal League. In order to get to the next rank in a Crystal League match, you got to win the previous one. And it gets harder and harder because of how few teams are competing. For example, for most players out there, if they're not regularly playing Crystal League, to try to hop in here and win a rank 4 5v5 Crystal League match, pretty impossible. On top of that, the matches become more sporadic. So for example, a 3v3 Crystal League match happens every day, a 4v4 every other day, a 5v5 twice a week, all the way up to a rank 9 that only happens once a season. So that means you have one chance a season to win a rank 9 Crystal League match. Once again, to get to a rank 9 Crystal League match, you have to win all the previous ones. So you have to show up for a 5, a 6, 7, 8 in order just to get that. On top of that, you have to get to a rank 7 20v20 Crystal League match. For the most part on the West server, that means you're competing against the one good team out there that gets that far. On any given day, there might be 1 to 3 teams queuing for 20v20 Crystal League matches. But when it gets down to that rank 7 20v20 Crystal League match, it's just one team. So if you were to put together a team of 20 players, you could certainly sign up and do the first couple ranks, but the chance of getting up to a rank 7 20v20 Crystal League match is close to impossible. Since the journal came out, we've had 2 rank 7 20v20 Crystal League matches. I've been lucky enough to be on the team for both of those wins, and there's a few other players that were the same. So at this point in time on the West server, there's about 35 players, I think, that have won a rank 7 20v20 Crystal League match. So then when I talk about how hard this category is, you got to imagine that of those 35 players, how many of them have hit 250k in all the Hellgate categories? Gets even smaller. And then if you imagine of those players, how many of them care about doing open world PvP, corrupted dungeons, Crystal Arena, etc., etc. That's why this category is definitely the hardest one. When you talk about trying to get to 100% in this category, I don't know if it'll ever happen. I'm certainly trying to make my way there, and I think I'm probably the person that's furthest along in PvP category, but I don't know if anyone will ever get to 100%. Let's check out the PvP infographic here. So there's 181 total achievements available in the PvP category. In order to get the avatar ring, you need 73. In order to get the wardrobe skin, you need 109. In order to get the mount skin, you need 145. So these are the recommendations I have for what I think are the easiest ones here. This infographic, I think, is the most objective one in order to compare what is easiest and hardest, because a lot of the ones in this category actually require skill. So the ones with the star are the ones that I think would be the easiest in order to get the avatar ring. To get the wardrobe skin, I'd recommend doing the star and the moon. And try to get the mount skin, I would recommend doing the star, the moon, and the heart. Again, there are a couple X's here, ones that I don't think you should necessarily try to grind for unless it's something that you're really interested in. Trying to win a rank 955 Crystal League match, for example, isn't something that's going to happen by fluke. Trying to get 250k infamy and 10v10 Hellgates or 5v5 Hellgates is pretty hard. 2v2, sure, but those ones are a little bit harder in my opinion. Defeat 666 players in full loot corrupted dungeons. It's going to take a lot of time, but those would be my recommendations. All right, the next category we have is social and guild. This is one of the newer categories. Social and guild and islands actually came up on the last large content update, but they weren't initially included in the journal. If you unlock 20%, you get the social and guild avatar. If you get to 40%, you get this avatar ring. If you get to 60%, you get this guild guidon. I don't even think I'm saying that correctly, but it's basically a guild banner that you can kind of stab into the ground. If you get to 80%, you get the guild jousting horse. And if you manage to get to 100%, you get to a bigger banner here, the glorious guild guidon. In terms of subcategories here, the player interaction subcategory is by far the easiest subcategory. This is one that you can knock out in an hour, maybe. The only more difficult one, I guess, would be win 100 duels and trade 100 times, but you could literally just stand in the bank with your friend and duel 100 times. I think you can knock out all 17 of this one in about an hour if you had to. Parties and friends subcategory is all about just, playing with friends. You have to do ready checks, you have to have friends on your friends list, all that kind of stuff. The hardest one here, of course, is get to 100 million fame while in a party of 20 players. So if you're someone that generally plays large-scale content with a guild, it's something that's doable. Otherwise, it's probably a pretty hard thing to do. The next subcategory here is guilds. I should probably mention also that if you don't have a guild, trying to complete the social and guild category here is going to be extremely arduous. I would say this category is definitely geared towards someone that is in a guild and regularly playing with their guild. If you don't have a guild, this whole category is going to be difficult. The guild subcategory here, there's a few little easy ones you can do within a couple seconds here. A lot of the more hard ones are just submitting challenge points to the guild challenge. These are things that will happen naturally if you're playing the game, but they will take some time. I've gone to 2.9 million out of 5 million, but I think the regular player might take a little bit longer to get there. Your guild also has to do quite well. In order to get to guild challenge level 99 with your guild, it's pretty hard. I don't know how many guilds regularly get there. For example, my guild got to second place in the season last season, and we didn't get to a guild challenge level 99. So I don't know how difficult it is to unlock that one. The next subcategory is crystal creatures. Obviously, you have to go around and kill any of the 3 crystal creatures. There's the spider, there's the beetle, and there's these cobra. You also have to kill crystal creatures in different zones. They want you going to quality 6 zones, quality level 5, etc., etc. And you have to kill lots of them. This is one that you can definitely grind out if you're in a group. Crystal mobs, unfortunately, are not super rewarding anymore. They used to give a lot of silver. You got a lot of loot from them, but now they don't seem to be super rewarding. So it's more so something that'll be beneficial for a guild. So if you're in a guild that's trying to up their level for the season or whatever, going around and killing crystal creatures is a good way to do it. The next subcategory is castles and castle outposts. This subcategory is pretty straightforward. You just have to join with your guild when they're doing castles and outposts. I would say it's something that'll naturally happen as well. You can't necessarily set out to try to go out and get as many castles as you can. But being in an active guild, a guild that's actively doing castles every single day is probably the easiest way to do this. Next subcategory is hideouts. You have to be in upgraded hideouts and you have to move cores to a hideout. This one is pretty straightforward. It's something that you can actually do on your own in terms of transferring a whole bunch of power cores. If you're out solo with a T4 Bloodletter set or T4 Double Bladed or a Cane set or something like that, you can just run around and find power cores. Finding the unupgraded ones is fairly simple, and just bringing them back solo to your hideout is definitely possible. So it is something you can grind, but otherwise just actively playing with your guild as you turn in power cores is going to be something that'll complete this category as well. The next subcategory here is large scale battles. This one is all just about ZVZing. If you're out in an active ZVZ guild, these sort of things will happen. Some of these aren't complete on mine because they were actually bugged for a while. The ones that are killer assists and killing X number of players within 1 minute was bugged for quite some time. It's something they fixed in a recent patch, but previously it was bugged for a long time. The next subcategory here is territories. This one is definitely pretty time consuming. You have to do lots of territory raids. You have to kill lots and lots of siphon mages. This is the one that I have the least complete. It's only at 58%. But of course, as seasons go on, I'll eventually complete more of these. And the final category is guild season here. Obviously, this one is just being in a successful guild. If you're in the guild that's going to go out and get a whole bunch of season points, if you're in a guild that's going to get to crystal ranking, then you're going to complete this stuff. Otherwise, it's just not going to happen. So if you're aiming to try to complete the social and guild category here, making sure that you're in a successful guild is extremely important. All right, let's check the social and guilds infographic here. So there's 193 achievements total. In order to get the avatar ring, you need to do 78. So those are the ones that I've marked with the star there. In order to get the wardrobe skin, you need to get 116. So that would be the star plus the moon. In order to get the mount skin, you need to get 155. So that'd be the star plus the moon plus the heart. This one's a little bit harder to qualify. In order for me to say which one's more or less difficult, it's kind of difficult because it all just depends on your guild. Again, if you're in a guild that's going to get to crystal ranking, getting to crystal bracket season guild reward or higher is just going to happen. But if you're someone that's not, making sure you're going out and getting into a higher ranking guild is kind of important for this category. So I would say my thoughts on which ones are easy and hard are based on what you can personally do as opposed to what your guild can do. But for the most part, this is what I think. And the last category, islands. This is another one of the newer categories that's come out, but it is one that's definitely achievable. If you complete 20%, you get this avatar. If you complete 40%, you get this avatar ring. If you complete 60%, you get this lovely straw hat, which I happen to think is pretty cool. If you get to 80%, you get the Bountiful Harvest Ox skin. It's actually one of my favorite skins in this whole journal. This little chick here, you see a little chick here? It just jumps up and down as you move. It's pretty cool. And if you get to 100%, you get to this beautiful, delightful straw hat. I don't know if anyone's gone to 100% in islands. I've been actively grinding and it's very, very difficult, so I don't think anyone has. But if anyone has, you get this beautiful skin. Let's look at the subcategories here. The first one here is personal islands. For most of these, you just have to upgrade a whole bunch of different islands. You have to have an island in every city. You have to have every island at level 6. You also have to place various items on an island. It's definitely one that's very easy to get to 100%, but it is pretty cost prohibitive. The next subcategory here is buildings. Again, this one's all very straightforward. It's definitely one that you can get to 100%. Depending on how much you care about doing this, you can just sink silver into doing this in literally a day. For example here, you have to upgrade every economy building to tier 8 at least once. You have to upgrade every farming building to tier 8 at least once. You have to upgrade every military building to tier 8 at least once. And you have to invest a total of 500,000 item value worth of resources into buildings. You guys want to know how I did this? Well, I built one of the economy buildings. I upgraded to tier 8. I demolished it. I built the next economy building. I upgraded to tier 8. I demolished it. I built the next economy building, and so on and so forth until I built every single one of the buildings up to tier 8 and demolished them. Obviously, a lot of the resources can be carried over, but you're losing resources every time you do this. So the cost that's going into this is pretty high, just for the sake of completing the category. The next subcategory here is farming. Farming is obviously something that's doable. If you're someone that actively farms already, awesome. If you're not, if you're someone like me that doesn't engage in farming at all, it's a little bit of work. The most time consuming one, of course, is you have to farm 3 million fame worth of crops. I am actively working on this. I'm doing my farms every day, I swear, and I'm at 2.8 out of 3 million. So I've almost finished this. I'm going to be so happy when I'm done farming. The other one that's a little bit more difficult is farming on an Outlands farming territory, which means your guild has to have a farm plot that they're willing to let you use. If they do let you use it, it doesn't take too long to get to 10,000 crops. I want to say I did it in about a week and a half. So if you have a guild that has a farm plot, just ask if you can use it for about a week and a half. I would say offer to pay for your own seeds and maybe turn in the crops. It's a little bit of a cost, but it'll get it done pretty quickly. I do have a pretty big tip for this subcategory, one that I don't think a lot of people out there know. The hardest ones on here are harvest 1,400 crops in 10 minutes on a single island and harvest 1,400 herbs in 10 minutes on a single island. If you've tried to do this, you'll realize that even with the farm bonus, it's pretty hard to hit 1,400 crops on a single island. But there's a little bit of a way to cheat this. When you go to check your crops, you can actually click on it and you can see how much the yield is there. So for example, if it's 10 yield, that's great. But if you click on it and it has 6 yield, that's awful. In order to get up to 1,400, the easiest way is just collect all of the ones that are under 10. So collect all of these ones that are under 10 and replant those ones. But any of the ones that are 10 and above, leave them there. And then come back the next day, do the same thing. Eventually, when you check, all of them are going to be over 10, and then you can just go around and collecting all the high ones. This will automatically knock off the 1,400 herbs, 1,400 crops, and it'll make it easier to do that one. The next subcategory here is animal breeding. This one is one of the more tricky ones. Again, it does have a lot of RNG. The thing that makes this really hard is you have to collect the offspring of a mammoth. If you didn't know already, mammoths have about 15% chance of having a cub when you raise them. I've gone through and I've raised about 9 mammoths so far, and I still haven't gotten a cub. So it's heavily RNG dependent. There's also one more achievement on here that isn't unlocked, and that is you have to collect the offspring of every animal. So until you've unlocked the offspring of a mammoth, you can't even see which ones you haven't unlocked yet. I believe I've collected the offspring of almost all other animals, but I can't figure that out until I've actually collected the offspring of a mammoth. If you happen to have a friend that regularly grows mammoths and they've checked and their mammoth has had a cub, you can ask them to give you rights to collect that mammoth, and this will work. I actually tried to do this once and it didn't quite work out in my favor, but that's probably the easiest way to do that one. Otherwise, this subcategory is pretty difficult to max out. The next subcategory is create food. This one obviously just has you crafting lots and lots of different food. This is also one that gets fairly expensive. Once you get up to these higher ones where you're crafting 1,000, 7.3 or 8.3 food items, where you're crafting 10,000 tier 7 or tier 8 fish food items, it gets very expensive. I've actually been stuck on this one here. Create 10,000 tier 7 or tier 8.3 food items. Of course, in order to make a 0.3 food, you will need 90 special fish sauce to make 10 of them. So effectively, it costs 9 special fish sauce to make 1.3 food. So if you need to make 10,000 of them, that means you need 90,000 special fish sauce. And you can go to any market right now. I guarantee you there is nowhere close to 90,000 special fish sauce available. So you might think, I'll just make my own special fish sauce. I'll just get chopped fish. There is not enough chopped fish in the world to make anywhere near 90,000 special fish sauce. So then you start buying all the fish. Essentially, I've done this stuff and I've gone to 2,000 out of 10,000. I started trying to calculate how much I still need. I think I need somewhere like 70,000 more special fish sauce. In addition to that, the cost to buy the special fish sauce right now is about 40,000 each. So you imagine that you need 90,000 times that by 40,000, you're looking at about 360 million just to buy the special fish sauce if it were available, but it's not. So either you got to start fishing a whole bunch or you got to get some sort of contract with a whole bunch of fishermen to turn in all their fish so you can make special fish sauce. Of course, this is something that'll happen eventually if you're someone that's regularly crafting. If you're a food crafter and you're crafting with focus regularly over and over and over again, eventually you'll probably hit this, but it's super, super time consuming and expensive. Otherwise, if it wasn't, this subcategory would be pretty easy. Next subcategory is create potions. Create potions, again, fairly straightforward. You have to make some poison potions, gathering potions, all the different kinds of potions. It does get pretty expensive when you get down to the point of needing 7-3 or 8-3 potions and a whole bunch of major potions. In order to make a 0.3 potion, you need to get pure arcane extract. In order to get pure arcane extract, you need rare animal remains from tracking. There is not enough rare animal remains on markets in order to get enough to make all the 0.3 potions that you need. So it is pretty time consuming. You have to put in buy orders, you have to go tracking, you have to disassemble artifacts in order to get the rare animal parts, but it is very time consuming or very expensive. I spent a lot of silver just getting to the point of completing the 1,000 enchantment level 3 potions. I haven't gone to the point of creating 100,000 major potions. It's definitely doable, but it's very time consuming. You need to constantly fill mammoths up with ingredients, and the ingredients do run out pretty often. So it's something that'll happen over a time scale. Again, if you're someone that's creating potions every single day, it's going to happen a lot quicker. But for people that aren't actively engaged in this part of the economy, it's pretty time consuming and expensive. And the last subcategory here is guild islands. This is again one there you have to be in a guild to. This is again a subcategory that you have to be in a guild to complete, obviously. You have to visit varying level of guilds. You also have to be on a guild island with a whole bunch of different people. The hardest one here, I think, is be on a guild island with 150 players at the same time. It says be on a guild island, but what it really means is you have to be on your guild island. You can't just go to someone else's guild island that has over 150 players and have it count. Easiest way to do this would probably be in a big guild, and on reset day, go to your guild island. Unless your guild happens to mass up on an island that isn't technically their guild island, then it won't work. But that's the easiest way to do that. Nothing else is super tricky in here. It's just all about being on islands and spending money on the guild marketplace. The most you have to spend on the guild marketplace is 1,000,000 silver. So if you just have one friend that buys your things for 1,000,000 and you buy theirs for 1,000,000, you'll complete it for both of you. And for our final infographic, we have the island guide infographic. There is 193 total achievements. To unlock the avatar, you need 78 complete. To unlock the wardrobe skin, you need 116. And to complete the mount skin, you need 155. So I would suggest if you're trying to get the avatar ring, go for the ones with a star. If you're trying to get the wardrobe skin, go for the ones with the star plus the moon. And again, if you're trying to get the mount skin, I would say go for the ones with the star, the moon, and the heart. This category also has the most X's. All the ones with black X's are ones I would say do not try to grind unless you really want to. So things like create 10,000 tier 7 fish foods or create 100,000 major potions. All of these are not only expensive, but very time consuming. There's also the ones here that say collect the offspring of a mammoth or have the offspring of every type of animal. These aren't necessarily ones you can force. They're very RNG dependent and also very costly. But that's the last infographic. Again, this is my opinion on which ones I think are the easiest, but hopefully it helps you. Now, with the Rogue Frontiers update, we are getting a new category, the creatures category. I was holding off making this video until the creatures category came out, so I could go through that as well. But after seeing it on the test server, I've noticed that a lot of it is literally just finding specific mobs. A lot of them are finding, for the most part, you're going to have to hunt down different mobs in different zones, kill a certain number of them, sometimes thousands of them. Sometimes you have to defeatle 3,000 disciples of Morgana, for example. But at least I can show you the rewards. For 20% in the category, you can get this avatar. For 40% in the category, you can get this avatar ring. Looks pretty cool. For 60%, you can get this cool undead skull that you can do a little stab motion with. For 80%, you get the emerald basilisk, which is actually a pretty cool looking skin. And for 100%, you get the demon skull, which actually looks awesome. From looking through the category, on the test server at least, nothing seems too surprising here. I'm sure some of these will have something like defeat 100,000 demons or something crazy like that. But for the most part, it just has you hunting down certain mobs. And that's all. That's all the different categories in the Albion Journal. If you made it this far in the video, congratulations. This has turned into a pretty long guide, a pretty long explanation of all the different things. Like I said, some of these are super easy to do. Trying to get to 100% econ, for example, just costs a lot of silver. Trying to get to 100% PvP, it's probably just not going to happen. And the rest of them are kind of somewhere in between those. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions on the journal, feel free to leave a comment. I'll be sure to answer. If anything is wrong in the video, feel free to leave a correction. If I did my math wrong somewhere or something like that, please feel free to let me know. I do stream every day on Twitch, so if you want to see more Albion content, feel free to hop by, pop into the chat, ask any questions you have. Thanks.